This recording provides an overview of how we can look at statistics from a gender perspective, and particularly provides focus on indicators and gender equality. In this presentation, we will show the importance of gender awareness at all stages and how data, statistics, and indicators are political. We will relate key concepts regarding gender and approaches to gender equality to statistics and indicators. We will examine how through data, statistics, and indicator, we can measure progress towards gender equality and women's empowerment. And finally, we will discuss how to capture outcomes and impacts for gender equality for the future. How to make sense of gender concepts in statistics? First of all, we need to ask ourselves if we're talking about sex or gender. We talk about sex disaggregated data, but gender statistics. This is because data is usually collected using categories such as women and men on the basis of biological sex, but analyzed from a gender perspective, that is, socially constructed gender. Of course, this can be expanded to take into account intersectional perspective. With data, we often have to take an intercategorical approach to intersectionality. How do we understand gender equality? There are usually three approaches to gender equality. The first one is that of sameness, where we treat everyone, both women and men, equally. The second one is that of difference, where we adjust to the different needs of all individuals, women and men. And finally, the third approach is that of transformation, thinking about how to adjust structures to provide more equal outcomes for everybody. What do we mean by gender statistics? Gender statistics report on the differences and inequalities in the situation of women and men, or girls and boys, in all spheres of life. They go beyond simply disaggregating data by sex. They make it possible to monitor progress towards gender equality and play a vital role in eliminating stereotypes. There is a need for a close collaboration between statisticians and users to ensure the development of adequate statistics addressing gender issues and ensuring a reconciliation of user needs and statistical production. Next, what do we mean by indicator? It is a measure that indicates the state or level of something. It represents statistical data for a period, a place, and other specified characteristics. It is used for the evaluation and monitoring of progress in programs. For example, literacy rate or the share of state budget devoted to education. What about gender indicators? They are used to monitor gender-based differences, developments in gender issues over time, and the progress towards gender equality goals. For example, fertility rate, gender pay gap, or the proportion of women in parliaments. There are different types of indicators, and they can be either quantitative or qualitative. Quantitative indicators are a quantity, that is a number, an index, a ratio, a proportion, or a percentage. They are comparable over time and space. Qualitative indicators are a description, for example, a grading, that is a quantification of something that cannot be measured. Both types provide valuable information, and you should always consider including both. All gender indicators are not of the same data quality. For example, the UN Statistics Division uses a three-tier system. Tier 1 are indicators that are conceptually clear, with an agreed international definition, and that are regularly produced by countries, such as, for example, statistics on employment. Tier 2 are indicators that are conceptually clear, with an agreed international definition, but that are not yet regularly produced by countries, for example, time use statistics. Tier 3 are indicators for which international standards still need to be developed and that are not regularly produced by countries. This is the case of statistics on violence against women, Finally, we need to consider what is a gender-sensitive indicator. The UN Gender Statistics Manual provides the following guidelines. Data are collected and presented by sex as a primary and overall classification. Data reflect gender issues. Data are based on concepts and definitions that adequately reflect the diversity of women and men and capture all aspects of their lives. Data collection methods take into account stereotypes and social and cultural factors that may induce gender bias in the data. Ideally, we want to work with gender-sensitive, transformative indicators. By this, we mean that the gender indicator must be sensitive enough to discern the nature and magnitude of the changes that have been achieved as a result of the implementation of the Gender and Development Agenda. An indicator varies a lot and fast when a change occurs. According to the UN Gender Statistics Manual, gender statistics have to respond to the needs of policymakers, advocates, researchers, the media, and the public. Gender statistics can be used to promote understanding of the actual situation of women and men in society, to advance gender analysis and research, to monitor progress towards gender equality and the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental rights by women and girls, to develop and monitor policies and programs orientated towards increased investments in human capital in the labor force, to support gender mainstreaming in development and poverty reduction policies, and to develop and monitor policies on the reduction of violence against women. When do we mainstream gender into statistics? Gender mainstreaming happens at all stages. When we establish the problem, when we define the target population, when we design the questionnaire, when we collect data, during the construction of variables and indicators, and during the analysis of the results. This raises many questions, and there is a demonstrated need for gender expertise in the interpretation of data. Interpreting data is key. Looking at these figures, the data points could represent different things. It could be a distance, it could be a shoe size, could be ages. It's important to note that there is no possible interpretation of data without a mutually understood context between all stakeholders. We might ask ourselves, what is the statistical relationship between female reproductive organs and sex? We could say that this is a strong relationship because sex is a matter of biology. We could then ask ourselves the same question in relation to having female reproductive organs and gender. And here, the relationship is less strong than with sex, because gender is socially constructed. Finally, we can also ask ourselves what is the relationship between having female reproductive organs and reproduction. And here, the relationship is even less strong, because during many stages of their life course, women do not engage in reproductive activities. However, this is problematic in that we often assume that the relationships between female reproductive organs, sex, gender, and reproduction are similar. Let's use statistics to challenge this association between sex and reproduction. Looking at reproductive activities and assuming that this consists of 9 months of pregnancy and 6 months of breastfeeding, we have a total of 15 months of sexo-specific reproductive activities per child potentially. The average number of births per woman is 2.5 globally, ranging from 1.2 in Korea to 7.6 in Nigeria. So women then, on average, are engaged in sexo-specific reproductive activities for 37.5 months in their lives. Now, knowing that women's life expectancy is 74 years, this represents 4% of women's lives. We conclude, therefore, that 96% of women's lives, on average, is not linked to sexo-specific reproductive roles. There is a relationship between statistics, gender, and power. We need to be mindful of statistics going from descriptive stereotypes to prescriptive and proscriptive stereotypes. We need to think about how do differences translate into inequalities of power, and how to use gender statistics on the basis of sex disaggregated data to show and transform gender relations. As Sally Engel Mary puts it, beneath the truth of quantified knowledge, indicators are part of a regime of power based on the collection of an analysis of data and their representation. It is important to see who is creating the indicators, where these people come from, and what forms of expertise they have. Rather than revealing the truth, indicators create it. In conclusion, gender statistics allow us to create a narration, to point a finger, to emphasize important gendered aspects, to make the invisible more visible. And we need to ask ourselves, what insights can be gained from gender statistics? Looking for those insights relies on the best ideas of gender experts. There is therefore a need to build capacity within this community to produce good data and better analysis.